Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast, our NFL-only Week 1 edition where you guessed it, just like the title says, we only talk about Week 1 of the NFL. If you figure that out all on your own without me having to give that explanation, you're just the kind of person I want here on the show. If it took me saying it out loud, hopefully you're just hungover. Week 1 is officially over. It's technically Wednesday, but I'm putting this out claiming that it's Tuesday. It's 1:17 a.m. Central Time, God's time as some people would call it, here in Houston, Texas, where I am residing in parts unknown within Houston, Texas. But yeah, I watched every game from this weekend, and actually some games I watched twice because on Sunday your boy celebrated properly. I drank 2 bottles of wine. By the way, I'm a wine guy now, so if anybody ever asks you in the streets, you tell them I'm a wine guy. That's mainly because when I drink whiskey, it would make me gain like 10 fake pounds of just pure inflammation in my body, which obviously is a sign that I should stop drinking whiskey. The biggest problem is that whiskey tastes just a little too good for your boy's liking. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We are not doing the nuke this week. Spoiler alert: the nuke was Tyreek Hill and the Cowboys defense. The nuke is a title that I give every single week to a player or entity that is within fantasy football. No free ads, bro. I need to stay hydrated though. Is a award that I give to the entity group because sometimes it does go to a defense that exists within the fantasy realm, and very similar to what the title implies. If you played against this entity or person, you got absolutely wrecked. You got wiped clean off the face of the earth. You got nuked. So if you played against Tyreek Hill, you more than likely lost. If you played against the Cowboys defense, you more than likely lost because most people are not anticipating having to go up against a defense that literally scored 42 points. And also, I'd like to point out, I think a lot of us are starting to learn how much fantasy football is skewed towards offense. If you haven't figured it out, where you have like 10 player slots and only one of them is dedicated to literally the other half of the field. Kind of bullshit, but that's just my opinion. I'm an IDP guy. I'm actually a multi-IDP guy per league because for as many of you who are out there talking about and complaining about different positions and how they're not valued for certain reasons, like you talk about running backs, you talk about tight ends, you talk about, in some cases, wide receiver, depending on how deep your wide receivers go in your league. If you really wanted to mix it up and have multiple pathways to victory within the course of your league as a commissioner, just pick up IDPs, bro. Add 2 individual defensive players to your fantasy league, and it opens up all kinds of pathways because every single team has at least one defensive player that scores in the double digits by standard IDP scoring on a regular basis every single Sunday. That's 32 more players that can score double-digit points in comparison to a running back that could score 4, could score 22, depending upon the week and the time and the person that they're with, all that kind of stuff like that. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about fantasy. This episode is about football and football only, and we are going to jump to one of my favorite segments, a segment that I put a lot of work into, and hopefully you'll enjoy, called Streaks, Peaks, and Ditches. So, if you're not familiar with this one, I'll re-explain it. We basically go through, I have 5 of these every single week, and they are used to talk about things that are happening in the league for individual players, for teams, and things that have been either a long-standing streak. Sometimes the streak is good and sometimes the streak is bad. There's a peak. Usually that's a career high for certain players. And then there's a ditch. That's a career low for either a team or a player, or sometimes it's just a really pathetic fact. So let's see what I logged up here real quick. So peak number 1, Sam Howell, starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders, becomes the first Washington QB since Jay Schroeder, a guy that we're all super familiar with because we all were paying attention to the NFL in the year 1986, which would be 6 years before I was born. Totally know who Jay Schroeder is. He's the first quarterback since 1986 for the Washington football team, in its long-standing different names and all that kind of stuff like that, to have at least 1 passing touchdown and 1 rushing touchdown in week 1 of the season. Moving on, we got another streak on this one. The Saints defense is as nasty as we've all thought it is. They tied a franchise record of 9 straight games of holding an opponent to 20 points or fewer. because, yeah, that's totally reasonable for a defense that, if you recall, did not have very much offense last year. By the way, in case you're wondering, Andy Dalton plays for the Panthers. Streak number 3 on the list right here. The Cowboys are 11-1 when they face the Giants on opening night. And actually went a little bit deeper on this one. There is no other team that the Cowboys have faced on opening night more than the New York Football Giants. So, a little personal, but kind of lopsided in a way. Anyway, moving on. Streak on this one. This is my 4th and penultimate one. Jared Goff has thrown 359 consecutive passes over the course of 10 games without an interception. It's kind of one of those examples of when you look at a certain player, you think of certain things. Like, for instance, Jared Goff with the LA Rams is a drastically different quarterback than we're seeing Jared Goff with the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff with the Detroit Lions has way more confidence than I think a lot of us thought about when we look at the Rams. The Rams were extremely high pressure situation, and Jared Goff, when he got traded to the Detroit Lions, the stakes were super low because guess what? The Lions are one of those organizations that, ownership-wise, they're not necessarily concerned about these wins and losses out here, you know what I mean? But they've turned it into something because of Jared's maturity, honestly. Like, one of the few examples where you can point out, like, this guy's clearly grown from where he was when you initially saw him in the league, and he was also able to survive long enough to be able to emerge into his one true self in the NFL. Because LA Rams, Jared Goff, it would be hard for me to believe that guy could play for 10 years. And Jared Goff with the Lions, I think that guy could be there for another 10 years on top of how long he's already been there, which I think is 3 seasons off the top of my head. Anyway, my last one of week 1 of the NFL season. This is a peak and a ditch, so bear with me on this one. It takes a little bit of reading, and it also takes a little bit of insider knowledge on the NFL. Jacoby Myers, wide receiver now for the Las Vegas Raiders, had 2 touchdowns on Sunday, tied for the most by any player in their Raiders debut for the first time in 43 years. Super sad that no wide receiver in their first game with the Raiders has ever had 2 touchdowns in 43 years. You would imagine with all the amazing football players who have played for the Raiders in the multitude of facets that they have, that at least one of them would have had 2 touchdowns in their first game ever. But I will also point this out, that 2 touchdowns scored by Jacoby Myers within the span of 43 years is also super impressive, because if you know anything about Jacoby Myers, he used to play for the New England Patriots. He was drafted by them, and his first 4 years in the NFL, he played with the Patriots. His first 2 years with the Patriots in the NFL, he had 0 touchdowns. Those last 2 years that he played, he had a measly 8 touchdowns over the course of 2 seasons. He had 2 in the 3rd year and 6 last season. And when he scored the first 2 touchdowns, it was kind of like a big thing on football Twitter, because Jacoby Myers had had the most yards and most catches of a player who had not scored a touchdown in the NFL. He was one of those guys who clearly was a highly productive wide receiver, but for some reason when it came to the red zone, he just kind of disappeared. And look, I don't want to be that guy, but he went from Mac Jones to Jimmy Garoppolo, and all of a sudden he's a multi-touchdown per game wide receiver. I don't know who's got the problem, but it don't feel like it's Jacoby Myers. So yeah, that's the weird part about the peak in the ditch on this one. It's a super low moment for the Raiders. 43 years without having a single wide receiver be able to catch 2 touchdowns in their first game with the Raiders, and then Jacoby Myers able to get 2 touchdowns out of his 10 total career touchdowns in his 5th year in the NFL in his first game with the Raiders. So that's pretty impressive. Also super sad all at the same time. Very, very strange. We are now moving on to the part that you've kind of been waiting on. I'm kidding. We're moving on to stuff that happened on Instagram. Got to grab that clout while I still can. If you want to, after every single NFL Sunday, I post on my Instagram story asking about people's reactions to certain games and stuff like that. I'm not going to read out the names of these Instagram people because most of them are people I know in real life, and I don't know if they want their names read on my podcast, which gets far fewer views than my Instagram account, which if you're interested in following me there, follow me at the Ashton Forever. Anyway, I got 4 4 comments when I asked for hot takes, thoughts, reactions to week 1 of the NFL season. This one comes from my lovely girlfriend. More walk-in fashion should be featured during games. I'd like to point out she doesn't necessarily watch like a ton of football, because most of us know that now the tunnel entrance stuff is put in the broadcasting stream. But I think she's talking about she wants to see all 53 of these motherfuckers who are on the active roster for each team and what they're wearing every single time. I sent her a photo of Mecole Hardman from the Jets wearing his overalls and chewing on a stick of hay, and she was just kind of like, "What's going on here?" He also had his diamond chain that had the Jets on it. Anyway, I could see how at some point the NFL is definitely just going to have a show centered around the fashion of NFL football players instead of just doing, I think they do that on NFL Network, but it's like a little segment within NFL Live. Anyway, this one is from somebody else I know as well. The Dallas Cowboys are a Super Bowl contender and a top 2 team in the NFL. God, I hope not. I would like to point this out. To be top 2 in the NFL, that means you got to be clutch. Because if there's one thing that does define, for those of you who don't believe in clutch, I beg you to tell me what Patrick Mahomes does when he pulls off comebacks versus teams, right? That's one of the aspects that it takes to be a top 2 team in the NFL. I would say that the San Francisco 49ers with Brock Purdy at the helm last year proved that they got a little bit of clutch juice in them. And then, of course, the many examples, the prime example being, it seems like it was a long time ago, but it probably really wasn't. Deshaun Watson was still a Houston Texan, and you remember that one time? You know what time I'm talking about. That one time the Houston Texans had like a 3-touchdown lead on the Kansas City Chiefs, and then they didn't. And then next week, the Chiefs were playing and the Texans were not in the playoffs. I'd like to point out, a lot of people forget the Texans may have had a massive comeback pulled off on them. I think it's like the second largest in NFL history, because the other one was the Oilers versus the Bills when they were on their way to like their 3rd Super Bowl or something like that. It happened to them. But I'd like to point out that Chiefs came back on all 3 teams that they beat on the way to winning the Super Bowl that year, not just the Texans. So, this one is from somebody I know that lives up north. He's a big Detroit Lions fan. Lions win the NFC North, but go 1-1 against the Vikings. Now, this is an interesting dynamic because remember, if you're new to football, I'll remind you, the NFC North is comprised of the Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the going 1-1 thing versus a divisional opponent seems pretty reasonable. Seems actually super normal, but it would also imply that he believes they're going to sweep everybody else, and that's kind of hard to fathom, considering from what we understand right now, the Packers are a damn good football team, and if they go 1-1 versus the Packers and then sweep everybody else, I'd be more likely to buy that one. They probably will play some closer games with the Vikings because we already saw versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, if there's going to be a game that 4 weeks from now, when the first month of the season is over with, and we kind of know a little bit more about the Vikings and we kind of know a little bit more about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because if you watch football, the beauty of it is every team goes through a roller coaster. There's very few teams that are, like, let's be real, if you're the same team that you were when you started week 1, you're getting smoked towards the end of the season, because evolution and adaptation is a part of being in the NFL in any kind of facet. But if there's one game that could deceive us all, it could be very similar to the I think it's 2018 when the UT Longhorns played the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on College Football Live or whatever, and it was Texas comes out with the win, and we thought Texas and Notre Dame were 2 of the best teams in the country, and it turns out that they both suck, and I don't think either one of them finished in the top 25. But anyway, if there was a game that could be that deceptive, it's that one. If I could pick a candidate where, hey man, we thought this was 2 relatively decent teams that have a lot of question marks about them, and then they all kind of, they could be competitive later on, and by the time a month rolls around, we're wondering where they're going to be picking in the top 5 of the draft, I could 100% see that. 100% without question. I subtly disagree because I think the bigger competition for the Lions is 100% going to be the Green Bay Packers, especially considering, the run game looked somewhat competent versus the Kansas City Chiefs, who did not have Chris Jones, one of, if not the best. No, it's still one of, because I watched Aaron Donald play against the Seattle Seahawks. He's still the best defensive tackle in the NFL. One of the greatest sound clips I've ever heard during the course of a game came from that game. Oh my God. Like a genuine guttural from the heart. A man afraid for his own well-being yelled, "Oh my God," while going up against Aaron Donald. If there's not a greater highlight that should be played when Aaron Donald goes into the Hall of Fame, which, by the way, if there was ever a person that we should remove the 5-year hesitation rule about, it's Aaron Donald. It's not even a question, bro. Unanimous Hall of Famer. Anyway, who cares? That's years from now. But the 1-1 versus the Vikings thing actually seems like it could work, because the Vikings could be the agent of chaos in the NFC North yet again. Now, we're only 1 week into the season, and if you were to overreact like an unreasonable person would, which, by the way, the fact that overreacting has become the norm and expected thing, to the point where everyone titles their podcast and every segment that they're doing is an overreaction to week 1 on purpose, then it's not an overreaction, it's just you reacting. And it gets into that weird, look, I don't want to get existential on people in terms of like sports media and stuff like that, but it gets into that weird infinite void of like, how far can you push it to get enough attention to stick out amongst a sea of people who are giving their opinions about sports. I'm never going to be that guy, mainly because my goal is to try and treat players like human beings, so that maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to interview and conversate with them, because I feel like there's way more value in learning about these players as people than talking about like the grandiose concepts of football and stuff like that. But that's just me. Yeah, man, it would be wild if the Lions got to a point where they swept the Packers and the Bears and then finished 1-1 versus the Vikings, because that would, I'm not gonna lie, if that does go down and that's how they win the division, NFC Championship game, I feel pretty confident saying it, because the offense of the Minnesota Vikings, which, by the way, oh boy, was I right about the whole Alexander Madison thing, where like, oh, y'all thought because they got rid of Dalvin Cook they were going to run the ball more, or maybe the exact opposite, or maybe they'll go back to doing what they were doing before, whatever. But yeah, the offense of the Vikings and their ability to keep games close is going to be paramount, and it's going to be a really good test for the Detroit Lions. The absolutely amazing defense that the Packers are unloading again, plus maybe Jordan Love continuing one of the craziest runs at quarterback that we've ever seen for an NFL franchise, in the sense that Jordan Love is just kind of picking up the torch and continuing to run, which, by the way, kind of means that Jordan Love is going to play for the Jets at some point. Like, that's a very weird, but in my mind, becoming a normalized reality about what could happen. Moving on. Last one I got, this is actually about one of the guys that we talked about last Tuesday, Caden Kahoo, who is the number 2 corner for the the Miami Dolphins, not the Minnesota Dolphins. But this guy he's a massive Dolphins fan, which means he's a big fan of this here podcast, because he saw that I picked the Miami Dolphins to win the Super Bowl. He also saw that I'm a big fan of Mac Hollins, of all people, mainly because of that one time he dressed up as Afro Luffy, which shows that he actually... Dressing up like Afro Luffy from One Piece shows that you've watched more than like 100 episodes, or that you're like not following the basic trend that tends to be happening in sports when it comes to anime. And that's just like, I watched Naruto. I'm like, cool, I guess. Even though One Piece is like in the same pantheon as Naruto in terms of like being the big 3 or whatever, but like Afro Luffy is a character that's 500 episodes in on the show, and to know who that is means you watch too much anime, my guy. Welcome to the club. Moving on. Caden Kahoo had an interesting game, I'll say the least. One of the pay-per-view matchups that we picked last Tuesday was, like I mentioned before, it was the Chargers DBs versus the Dolphins wide receivers. No, I think it was the Chargers wide receivers versus the Miami Dolphins secondary. And if you didn't see, the game was explosive is the best way to describe it, and they were on fire. The DBs this is one of those examples. Like, if you go back and you look at, when you go back and you watch Bengals Browns, which, by the way, it's not fun because there's like so many potentially absolutely explosive plays that got wiped away purely because it was raining during that game. Like, I don't think that you should be able to credit a wide receiver with a drop based off what I saw in the course of that game. And I know some of you guys think you're cool when you say, like, oh, if you can get your hand on the ball, you should catch it. This is the real world where, like, NFL quarterbacks have to throw the ball, like, they have to throw it relatively hard to get it into some of these tight windows. And when you have to body catch in the rain because your gloves don't work and your hands are wet, it slips off your forearms. It's just how it is. Obviously, like I said before, there's some people who are just unreasonable about things, and that's how they choose to live their life. That's not how I choose to live mine. Moving on, what was I saying? Oh, Caden Kahoo. The take was that he'll surpass Xavier Howard, and you better hope not, I guess. Xavier Howard just got paid like mad money, and maybe it's in the sense that Xavier Howard is an elite level corner, and then Caden Kahoo becomes an even more elite level corner, which actually would make a ton of sense due to the fact that, you know, when you have a shutdown corner on the opposite side of the field and you know a bunch of the balls are going to come your way, it makes you, for the most part, it helps a lot of other defensive players step up because it simplifies what side the ball can get thrown to, and every time that there's a pass play coming, which is one of the few things that one of the few guarantees you'll ever get in the NFL, or one of the close to a guaranteed things that you'll ever get in the NFL, and it's the ability to kind of reduce something before the snap of the ball, right? Like, if you know that they're not going to throw to Xavier Howard's side on the right-hand side, that takes away one person, and that helps out a ton. But yeah, no, those are some of the Instagram responses that I got when I asked for hot takes, thoughts, reactions, and all that kind of stuff like that. I really hope Caden Kahoo continues to be massively successful. One, because we talked about him on the show. Two, his story is fucking crazy. If you didn't catch it on last week's episode on the stream, make sure you go check out the stream from last week. But I'll summarize it here. Caden Kahoo is from the Ivory Coast, and he moved to America. I watched an interview where he said he had to take like 7 planes to immigrate to America. He moved to Texas and then went to Texas A&M Commerce, which, if you're not familiar with what that designation means, it means it is a satellite school of the main campus for Texas A&M. So main campus for Texas A&M is Texas A&M College Station, which from where I live is an hour and a half away. And Texas A&M Commerce, I want to say, is like East Texas, like out in the desert or something like that. But yeah, Texas A&M Commerce, there's Texas A&M Corpus Christi. There's also very famously Florida A&M, very similar but not in the same family. It's a HBCU. Very different places if you know what Texas A&M is all about. I got a bunch of friends that are Aggies, obviously, as a person who lives in Houston, but they're a cult. Anyway, good luck with that. But yeah, wishing Caden Kahoo all the success. I'm going to tell you this right now. He's probably not going to have too much of a test. He's not going to have as hard a test as he had this past Sunday, because that Chargers-Dolphins game is going into consideration for a game of the year, and it is week 1. So, yeah, tons of fun. A lot of people dissing on J.C. Jackson. And all I really have to say to you is he literally shattered his ankle last year, and he's now being asked to compete with the best, fastest wide receiver in the NFL. Not necessarily best or anything like that, but to think that some of you guys think that that's like a viable whatever, man. People are so weird sometimes, bro. Moving on, let's talk about the games. Let's talk about the games, shall we? We did streaks and peaks. We're bringing back the categories again this year. So we have the Heartbreakers category, the oh my category, where you see a game that has some kind of interesting result, whether it goes a game that is closer than it should be, and a game that is a nasty blowout that is alarming for one team or another. And then there's the this is what we're here for category. The games that are the reason that you as a football fan watch football, the games that are the kind of games that create new fans, right? So we got those. Those are last, obviously. We got to get through the snooze fest games and talk about those a little bit. So the Baltimore Ravens showed up at their home stadium, and then the Houston Texans kind of showed up a little bit. CJ Stroud had his first ever start in the NFL in the regular season, and his first pass was completed to himself. So, smart play on the part of C.J. Stroud. He actually had a ball deflected up into the air, which, by the way, when are we going to start talking about how quarterbacks on average seem to be getting shorter? Like what it takes to be a successful quarterback, getting a little bit shorter. I would also like to point out, saw a lot of balls deflected down, and I think that's an example of what NFL vets would call knowing your throwing lanes, because the throwing lanes are smaller in the NFL, so you think that you have a chance to be able to get a throw off, because typically when you are an NFL caliber player and you're playing at like the high school or collegiate level, and I say that like with genuine sense that there are some guys who are going to become NFL caliber players who are playing at the high school level and they're dominating and they can get away with a lot of stuff because of their physical prowess or their mental acumen on the field. There was some of that with CJ Stroud. I will also point out the concerns about the offensive line shit. That is real. That is real, and it is big, and it's a problem for literally everybody involved, including your boy, for the most part. If you didn't hear about it during the preseason, the Texans had they had 3 of their 5 offensive linemen get hurt in some way, shape, or form throughout varying lengths of time that they're going to be out, including Titus Howard. Basically, the only one that didn't get hurt is Laramie Tunsil, who seems indestructible at times, mainly because he's a massive human being, and it kind of showed a little bit. The Ravens had damn near every single one of their defensive linemen go off. In particular, man, this game, you want to talk about put your stamp on it? This game revitalized, I think, a lot of people's attention towards linebackers. If you were paying attention to this, and yes, this is coming from the guy who likes linebackers a lot. If you were paying attention to this game, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen dominated at almost every single phase of this one. When they got sent on blitzes, they got home. When they got into run fits, they were able to shoot through the gaps so quick to the point where they almost pulled off the Jadeveon Clowney play like a couple of times. And as the Texans offense kind of finds its own footing, because it has to obviously adjust to the timing of CJ Stroud, his ability, and then try and figure out something with these wide receivers, man. Nico Collins is the guy that everybody's focused on, and with good reason. Thought Dalton Schultz was going to be a way bigger part of the offense for the Texans, and that just didn't happen in this game. I think he got like 2 catches for like 4 yards or something like that. Even the checkdowns didn't work for the Texans versus the Ravens, man. And you know, they couldn't string together enough positive plays to keep a drive alive. And that's disappointing because the defense actually played really well up front. And that's actually the theme, kind of the theme. There's like 3 of them. One, they not calling false starts on left tackles anymore, apparently, for some reason. And 2, young rookie first-round running backs not getting as many carries as we thought. Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, even though Bijan Robinson had like one of the, if not the best play of the entire weekend, one of the most dynamic first touchdowns for an NFL player ever. And then 3, defenses holding out for their offenses to come out there and make something happen as they kind of get their rhythm and get in sync with each other, and then the defense kind of having to go out there and make the plays. Like, there were a lot of defensive touchdowns this week. Anyway, this game was kind of boring. Score is 25-9. The biggest thing that comes out of this is the massive amount of injuries to the Ravens, man. Like, I know the Chargers haven't gotten started on their little choo-choo train that they get on every single year where everybody on their team gets hurt in some way, shape, or form. And that's actually, like, more fitting this year. They're getting older. Like, you look at Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. By the way, Austin Eckler killed it versus the Dolphins. Kind of sucks that they didn't give him his money. That was awesome. If you wanted a 4th theme of the week, that's probably it. All these running backs that they say ain't worth nothing, shouldn't get paid, went out there and killed it. Especially for some of these offenses that didn't have enough variance to be able to really challenge the defenses they were going up against. But that's a story for another day. Yeah, good luck with that $44 million, Danny. You might not make it a year 2. We'll see what happens. Anyway, yeah, man, Ravens kind of ran on this one mainly because C.J. Stroud seemed like he was under duress. Some of it was definitely overreaction to previous pressure that had happened before, but for the most part, the pressure was real. Like, the pressure was real the entire game. There's no question about that whatsoever. Had a couple of good runs. Like I said before, couldn't string anything together to save a life out there. But yeah, man, good first start. It didn't look like a total disaster like I expected it to be, mainly because the Ravens are so good at running the ball. They take a lot of time off the clock, so you don't really have like a ton of time to even make a ton of mistakes. But nonetheless, J.K. Dobbins out for the season off of a tackle from Denzel Perryman, who, by the way, Denzel Perryman looking like he always does, just like he did when he was with the Raiders. Jonathan Grenard looking pretty stout out there. Sucks that Jalen Petrie couldn't finish the game because the defense looks like they're kind of putting it together. Will Anderson gets his first career sack. I think he's like the stat was he's the 7th Houston Texans player to get his first sack in his debut, I think. But yeah, they were looking pretty good, man. They held up for as long as they possibly could, especially against a team that is a playoff hopeful, for whatever you have to say. I think even more so after we saw what happened with the 49ers and the Steelers. So, yeah, man. Losing Ronnie Stanley for a little while. J.K. Dobbins going down off a torn Achilles. Jesus, man. It is heartbreaking. He has spent his whole career and has not had injuries like this until he gets to the NFL. And obviously, later on down the road, when it comes time to pay J.K., they're going to act like they don't speak English, right? That's just how it is. And, yeah, man, it's tough to see. I don't care what person you are from what team it is. J.K. Dobbins, as far as I know, is a good dude. I haven't seen him tweet any sketchy stuff or like any sketchy stuff on the internet or anything like that. Haven't seen him say anything messed up. So it's just really heartbreaking to see a guy who you know worked super hard to get back from an injury where he talked about he tore everything in his knee. PCL, LCL, MCL, and part of his hamstring got ripped off when he got hurt last season. Crazy, man. Came back, was limping and still running faster than me by like a lot out there, and ran for a couple touchdowns. And then for him to go down in the season, in the season opener, the home opener, man. I would love to know what that guy's mental psyche is built out of, because it has to be something like titanium or steel. I mean, the fact that he even came back and was still doing what he was doing today was kind of amazing. But Ronnie Stanley, J.K. Dobbins, I think they lost Brandon Stevens as well, one of their DBs, who was an integral part of their secondary in particular. Further down the field, Brandon Stevens is like one of those guys that kind of floats in between down in the box and dropping back in cover 3. Huge issue, obviously, but nothing that he couldn't cover versus the Texans, because the wide receiver position is such an issue. So we'll see. But yeah, Ravens, Texans, final score is 25-9. That one was pretty much a layup in terms of the pick'ems and everything. Oh, I didn't do that part. My bad. Pick'ems wise, I went 10-5 on the money line. We went 10-5 in the spread, and we went 8-7 on confidence. I don't know how you lose. I guess if you get I clicked 2 answers differently than I did against the money line or something like that, because they're the same answer. It's just about assigning points to each one of those games. Anyway, I guess I clicked the wrong team or something, and I lost out on 2 wins. I'll live. We're in the 96th percentile after week 1, which means jack shit, because people can... It's 50-50, guys, right? Like, there's only one right... Technically, there's only 2 right... There's 3 right answers, but the tie is unlikely. Unless it's Monday Night Football and it's the Jets and the Bills. Anyway, final score, Cleveland Browns 24, Cincinnati Bengals number 3. They finished with 3. They are not number 3 in the NFL. Big thing coming out of this one, Jack Conklin, they announced this like yesterday. He's on season-ending IR. Really, really big bummer for a guy who, was one of the brighter spots when he was with the Tennessee Titans, and they miss him badly now. But now with the Bengals, he was doing really well, and now he's out again. So that's a bummer. One thing that I took away from this, listening to other podcasts, I'm not gonna sit here and lie. I don't listen to other sports podcasts. Stop telling that lie that Deshaun played well. For the most part, this game had a shit ton of rain coming down in it. So like I said before, it affected the wide receiver's ability to be able to catch the ball. First half of that game, he was super inaccurate. I'll say in the second half, there was a lot more of the weather at play in terms of whether or not the wide receivers can catch the ball. But the fact of the matter is, anything that was further down the field than 15 yards, he was really struggling to hit with any kind of stride and consistency. And obviously, some of that has to do with the ball being wet. So we'll see what happens in week 2. But stop telling that lie that he played well. Like, he did not. They utilized the fact that their run game was ridiculous. Deshaun contributed to the run game big time on that one, and it's, he looked like he always does when he was with the Houston Texans. And then Nick Chubb carried the squad. Nick Chubb and the defense, that's the number 2. That's 2 things to take away from this. Nick Chubb's still good at running that ball. It turns out if you give Nick Chubb the ball, people run into him and they don't take him down somehow, like they haven't done for the past 4 fucking years or something like that. The defense for the Browns is insane. Obviously, the clip of Myles Garrett doing the little crossover motion, which, by the way, actually helps you shift your weight evenly while you're approaching the center, and then waiting for that snap to happen. Also, kind of adds in a level of deception as to whether or not you're actually going to rush. Joke's on him. Of course, he was going to rush the entire time. Absolutely cooked that center. A lot of people forget the center position. If you want to find one of the weakest offensive linemen, typically on most offensive lines, it's the center, who is more of a lead blocker when it comes to running for the most part, and is typically a little bit lower to the ground in terms of height and stuff like that, to be able to be like a spearhead when you're talking about lead running up the gut, right? They're not necessarily great pass blockers because they're so light. And it showed on that one. Obviously, it's difficult for anybody to stop Myles Garrett. I'd like to say the setup for that play was pretty spectacular as well. They made sure that I want to say they had him in wide 9. That's how far out those defensive ends were. The reason they did that is to force the guards to take their pass protection steps and step out to the outside in case there was a spike. It's called a spike, but it's like a dive play to the inside from one of the D ends, and they took their eyes off Myles Garrett for half a second, and he was able to get a one-on-one with the center, which obviously made it a lot easier to get to Joe Burrow, which, guess what? They were doing that all day. This is one of those moments, and we don't want to shame people here. We're not here to body shame anybody. It's one of those moments as to why they measure people's hands at the combine. So Joe Burrow was really having a tough time holding on to the ball throughout the course of this game, and obviously the rain was coming down. If you have not watched this game, go watch it, and you can see the degree. It wasn't as bad as Sunday Night Football. Sunday Night Football was just like a typhoon that had no lightning or anything like that. But the Browns game, it was pretty heavy rain that clearly affected, one, how the ball looked, because the ball looked darker than it normally does, and it looks usually pretty dark when they get done rubbing in the mud and conditioning it and everything like that, but it looked even darker because of the water that was getting into the ball and all that kind of stuff. So Joe was having a tough time holding on to the ball. He was having an even tougher time getting the ball out with touch. There was a lot of plays where, one, the defensive backs for the Browns had such tight coverage that the little margin, the little wiggle room that was around Joe Burrow's throws towards Jamar Chase in particular and T. Higgins, they couldn't get it into the window, because if it was close in the window, the DB was there enough to shut that portion of the window and make it impossible for the wide receiver to catch it. By the way, they look like the defense. They finally look like the secondary that we were all kind of promised a couple years ago. Grant Delpit, Denzel Ward, and then Greg Newsome as well looked spectacular throughout the course of that game, man. And I hope they can continue it, because that's the Browns defense. What we saw versus the Bengals this past Sunday, that's the Browns defense everybody thought was going to show up when Baker Mayfield was in the final years of his deal. And that's the kind of Browns defense that can get them deep into the playoffs in a really tough AFC. Like I said, the biggest upside was the defense was doing their job, because the start of the fourth quarter, the score was 13-3 in the course of this game. Yeah, I want to say the Bengals didn't get into... They got into Browns territory on their second drive, and they didn't get back into Browns territory until their fifth or sixth, and that's when they were able to get that field goal. So there was a couple of missed field goals in this game too, because of the slick conditions from that, and of course the rain affects the flight of the ball, and it also affects the weight of the ball. And I know a lot of you think that's a small, minute thing, but kicking a ball that is wet it's still it's just like holding a slippery ball in your hand, except with your foot. So, but yeah, overall, this was a domination on the part of the Browns because they brought the better defense and they were able to piece together enough of a run game that when the fourth quarter rolled around, they were dealing with an exhausted Bengals defense that couldn't keep up with Nick Chubb vast majority of the game, let alone after 3 quarters of chasing him around the field. Then plus add in Deshaun Watson, and their backup running back was out there looking kind of good, man. And you sprinkle in a couple of completions for like 4 or 5 yards down the field. I know they had one big completion for like 20-something yards, but for the most part, any attempt to get the ball to Amari Cooper did not work. They spent a lot of time throwing to Harrison Bryant, who scored a touchdown in this game, a passing touchdown from Deshaun Watson, and that paid off later on. They stuck with trying to pass the ball consistently. They changed the types of passes that they were requiring of Deshaun to be successful. A lot more of it went horizontal as opposed to vertical down the field, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Horizontal passes require breaks downward towards the line of scrimmage from defenders, and if you're on a wet field, it's hard to make that cut. It's hard to make that cut, and the offensive players, they just got to cut up field, right? So yeah, that was pretty much how they did it. They stuck with running the ball. They changed the way that they were trying to pass it down to get down the field and started depending more on yak and way less on the actual distance traveled by the ball in the air. And it paid off for them. The Bengals spent most of their time trying to get the ball to Jamar Chase. Joe Mixon kind of helped out a little bit, but it was way too many passes for a bad weather conditions. Moving on, final score in that one, like I said before, Browns 24, Bengals 3. Bam. Packers Bears 38-20. This almost made streaks, peaks, and ditches, but it was too sad for me to say. The Packers have won their 9th straight game over the Bears. This game was way more about the Bears being pretty far away from where people thought they were going to be. Off-season hype was way too high. A lot of it thanks to Big Cat from Barstool being a Bear. See, this is the problem, too. There's 2 teams that get a lot of media coverage because 2 of their fans are massive, big-time podcasters in the world, and it's Big Cat with the Bears, and it's PFT with the Washington Commanders, which makes a lot of sense. If I had that kind of a platform, I'd be hyping up the Texans and the Seahawks all the time, right? But yeah, no, they're just not ready yet, man. The Packers are a team that is really well put together. 38 points on the board says all you need to say. The defense went out there and did their job because they just don't have enough variance at the wide receiver position for people to really be threatened by them. Darnell Mooney, still pretty good. DJ Moore didn't get enough targets. A lot of run attempts with Khalil Herbert. And, yeah, man, Justin Fields. We got to figure that out. Seems like a really talented guy. Just got to put him in a position to be able to succeed. But the Packers with Jordan Love has been an understudy for what seems like 17 different fucking years. Of course, he would have to come out here and perform really well against a poor to average Chicago Bears team that still is struggling to generate a pass rush, by the way. Not great when you don't have like lockdown corners. They do have Jaquan Brisker, who I'm a big fan of at the safety position, but the Bears ask a lot of their defense every single day. Every single Sunday they ask so much of their defense just for them to come up with 20 points or scrape by with 14. Moving on, speaking of scraping by, the Saints beat the Tennessee Titans 16-15. Tell you how riveting this game was. Tell you, based off the fact that it's in the snooze fest category, should tell you all you need to know, but I need to do that thing where I read off one stat that kind of like bums you out. The Saints scored their first touchdown of the season, which was in this game, with 1:28 to go in the third quarter. Yep. By the way, the Titans did not score a touchdown in this game. They kicked all field goals. Yeah, the Titans by the way, this was Ryan Tannehill's. Ryan Tannehill and Joe Burrow had the worst games they've ever played as professional quarterbacks. Now, I think the reaction is going to be drastically different by both teams. Mike Vrabel already looking at Mayo Boy. Let's be for real. If you're a Tennessee Titans fan, do you really want to go back to Malik Willis? Because I don't. They got. If you didn't know, they got real hyped about how Malik Willis played during the preseason, and some of it looked good. Some of it was a lot of the stuff that we saw Malik Willis do at Liberty. I will also like to point out there's a massive difference between the preseason and the regular season, and I don't want to fall for if I'm a Titans fan, I'm not trying to fall for the same trap twice. I'd much rather play Will Levis than put out Malik Willis. But if you're the Tennessee Titans and you think that Will Levis is further behind than Malik Willis off the simple fact that Will Levis just got here, ain't no way he got the offense down pat inside and out, right? And quite frankly, you know what the messed up part about the Titans' job is? They not even ask you to go out there and be a superstar, bro. They not even ask you to go throw downs to DeAndre Hopkins, which you don't have to. All you got to do is put it in the general vicinity, and he'll find a way to come up with the catch. That's just facts. This is scientific facts. DeAndre Hopkins finds a way to catch the ball. Remember that one time he had a whole season where he was like top 5 in receiving yards and he didn't drop a single pass that was thrown his way? Crazy, right? Treylon Burks. At some point, we got to get the ball. We got to get the ball to the young man, right? We got to find out if this guy can really do his thing. The messed up part about being the Titans quarterback, they asking you to be Daniel Jones. They ask you to be just a little bit better than Daniel Jones to make this team win. The defense showed up today. They showed up on Sunday, like they normally do, man. Like that's the crazy part. The Titans they have basically retrofitted their defense in like 1 year. They went from remember that year they had like the lowest pressure rate in the NFL? I think that was like 3 years ago. They had one free agency period and 2 drafts, and they completely turned around the way that you perceive their level of defense. Now, they went up against the New Orleans Saints led by Derek Carr, and apparently Michael Thomas has a pulse now. Congratulations to him from coming back from the dead. Chris Olave had his 4th 100-yard game in his young career, but nonetheless, there was only 16 points on the board, dog. And we'll find out a little bit later on this season whether or not this is what we can come to expect from the Saints, or if this was a direct product of how good the Tennessee Titans defense is. And I'd hate to sit here and watch yet another NFL team with an elite level running back and a top-notch defense not be able to do anything because they can't find a guy who can complete a pass further than 15 yards. Further than 10 yards in some cases, right? And at some point, we got to start asking ourselves, what do we call him? What's going in the headset? You know? But yeah, Saints get the 1-point win. And they move on. Or go marching, as some people would say. The Tennessee Titans 0-1. 0-1. Rough day for the AFC South. 3 losses. I will say the Jaguars did play the Colts, but you know what I mean. The heartbreaker category, we only got 3 games in this one, and the heartbreaker category, if you're new to this, it is the category where the game was so close that you feel like it could potentially break the soul, the heart, if you will, of a team and have long-lasting ramifications. I wouldn't say that in week 1. I just put a bunch of really close games that had heartbreaking endings to them in this category. There's only 3 of them. The Buffalo Bills played the New York Jets. And then one of the strangest things that happens pretty consistently in sports happens. A prominent NFL player gets hurt, and there's people who have, like, jokes on deck. Like, they have jokes that they had in the fucking drafts ready to go. And it's tough, man, because it's just like you're making fun of like a real person. I don't even like Aaron Rodgers like that, bro. Like, I'm not falling for the Hard Knocks bullshit. And I know a lot of y'all don't care about what he said during 2020 for various sorts of reasons. But facts are, man, it's kind of tough to sit there and watch y'all make fun of an old man get hurt. You know, but yeah, it's a freak incident because like Aaron Rodgers is athletic as hell, especially at the quarterback position. And so to see a guy like Leonard Floyd, who is very good at rushing the passer, land on his leg like that, and it just like completely just rip, and that's like the biggest injury he's had in his entire career, essentially. Like, he broke, if you forget, he had like his thumb fractured last year, but when they were going into the playoffs, and he just decided, oh yeah, I'm not getting surgery, we're just gonna play through it, right? But yeah, that happens. Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles. A lot of people, by the way, football doctor Twitter, crazy how fast they're getting now. I'm dead serious, guys. There's a guy that I follow on YouTube that breaks down, like, he uses like an anatomy tool to show you like the muscle fibers, the bone placement, and explains each muscle and how they all link together and stuff like that. He uses an anatomy tool to be able to do that, like a digital skeleton like you would see in class, to detail what happened. And the injury happened. He had his video uploaded before the quarter was over, bro. Straight up. Football doctor Twitter, crazy fast. And he actually had the wrong prediction. I think he said something about like a calf strain, because I'm assuming because he didn't have like that high definition replay or whatever. Because of football doctor Twitter, your boy knows a torn Achilles when he sees one. That whole thing, it was fully taught, it was fully pronated, extended, and then all of a sudden, all the tension went away. And I don't know how Aaron Rodgers got up and stood up on his 2 feet, because you're not supposed to be able to bend your foot after you tear your Achilles, and maybe that's why people thought it was like a calf strain, but it looked like, when you see it in slow motion, obviously everything looks different in slow motion. We live in that time now. Like, we saw it happen with Thursday Night Football for the season opener, where people had that clip of Clyde Edwards-Helaire running to the right-hand side where all the blockers were, and then there was just like this ocean of space to the left of him, while not giving any context to it whatsoever. Same thing with slow-mo stuff. Like, everything looks like it's ACL tear when it's in slow-mo, right? And sometimes your knee can just buckle, bro. Sometimes you can just roll your ankle and it goes a funny way and it looks like you broke it, right? This was one of those cases where you could see it clearly pop. And the Jets colors are not really conducive to seeing like what's going on underneath for the leg and stuff like that. But yeah, it was kind of crazy, man. Aaron Rodgers is out for the season. They can't even call Mike White, bro. They can't even call Mike White to come save the day. I wonder who the Jets are on the phone with. I have to assume it's Phillip Rivers, because we heard that story about how who was it? It wasn't the Rams, was it? It was the 49ers. The 49ers' plan was, if they made it to the Super Bowl, they was going to give old Philly boy a ring-a-ding-ding as he was getting ready for his like 10th child, which, by the way, he's just going to keep coming back, man. Those kids are expensive as hell, and you all know it. They all play sports too, from what I understand, which means that Phillip Rivers got teams of people delivering these kids to and from places, or guess what? They all play the same sport in the same league, regardless of whether or not it's co-ed, if you know what I mean. So, Buffalo Bills 16, New York Jets 22. Now, you're probably wondering, oh man, that's kind of amazing the Jets were able to pull that off. It kind of wasn't. It's kind of impressive that the Bills were able to keep this game relatively close. Jordan Whitehead had 3 interceptions in the course of this game because tight end Josh Allen decided to make an appearance on this one. If you're not familiar with tight end Josh Allen, it is the original form that Josh Allen entered the NFL in, and then he became a quarterback by a lot of people's metrics. It's a joke that It's a joke that used to get made on Bomani Jones' show The Right Time, and I make it here now because I think it's funny. But yeah, tight end Josh Allen tends to make an appearance. Like, it used to be like 3 or 4 times a year. Now it's more like 1 time a year, and it's a little concerning that it's on week 1. But hey, that's just me. The Bills take the L on this one, going into overtime off a Xavier Gipson punt return touchdown. And it's the 3rd time that there's been a punt return touchdown in the history of NFL overtime. What a way to end week 1. To lose the guy that every single news media outlet has been absolutely obsessed with. Hard Knocks, yet again, once again, I mentioned it last episode and I still stick by it. We are in the dying days of Hard Knocks because The Chargers have all in. The 49ers have brick by brick. The Lions have the Lions Den. And yes, it is Homer propaganda, but nonetheless, every single one of those YouTube shows that they let the social media team use them high definition cameras where you can see, like, the 4K ones, where because they know that you can activate 4K on your phone but not necessarily have a 4K TV. They get to use the fancy cameras and record stuff at practice. Just like in Hard Knocks, they follow people home. They show you all these different things that you should love about each one of these guys. What is it? The Chiefs one is called The Kingdom. All that kind of stuff like that. Every single NFL team has one except the lame ones, so the Texans. Anyway, the dying days of Hard Knocks are upon us. They just lost. I mean, once again, the Lions season is probably the biggest payoff we've had from Hard Knocks in the last decade, right? A whole offseason hyping up Aaron Rodgers going to New York, the bright lights, and he's done 75 seconds in. Terrible for Aaron Rodgers. Everybody keeps talking about how he's not going to come back. I think he's coming back. I don't think he was actually planning on trying to, kick rocks or anything like that when he left the Packers. Mainly, I thought it was just a ploy to get them to accelerate the trade. So, and it worked. It worked. Anyway, kind of a bummer that he took that pay cut too. I think it was like $60 million or something like that. Big bummer. Now he's sad and broke. I'm kidding. We all know that Aaron Rodgers isn't broke. He just dresses like he is. He dresses like a free man, a man of the earth, if you will. The Jets win a crazy season opener in a divisional matchup, by the way, so that could pay off big time when they cannot beat the Bills 10 weeks from now, I believe it is. So, Sunday Night Football, Heartbreakers category as well. Yeah, you guessed it, that one time the Cowboys showed up and the Giants were standing on the field in a couple of different locations while the Cowboys put up 40 points on them. Ran away with the thing. By the way, I hope we get to see more of this. They did. So that play that went viral with Myles Garrett doing the crossover thing in front of the center also happened in the Cowboys game multiple times. So they took Micah Parsons and they shot him through the A-gap as opposed to keeping him out on the edge to attack the tackle. And once again, talk about picking mismatches. Micah Parsons versus a center, massive mismatch. Especially if the center doesn't call for the double team, and sometimes they really don't. But yeah, I'm not gonna talk about this game very much, man. The Cowboys put up 40. Sorry, I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. That's how much I don't care about this game. The Cowboys play football. The Cowboys play football. The New York Giants did not. I'd like to say this is exactly what the Giants deserve for not giving Saquon Barkley his money. That's all I can really say. Seems like a just punishment from the football gods to get embarrassed like that when you decided to pay the guy who basically rode the coattails of one guy to $44 million a year without proving that he actually has any of the talent that it takes to justify that $44 million. It is only week one. This could change drastically. I don't think it will. The Raiders took on the Broncos. This is a heartbreaker category. Sean Payton almost had that season opening debut after 2 years? 2 years in a coaching hiatus. But look, man. Look, I said it before. If I could have picked the fifth team to put on, or a fourth team to put on my most likely to go winless list, I would have put the Raiders. And they kind of look semi-decent in this one, man. Like, Devontae Adams still got the juice. Jimmy Garoppolo still playing slightly above average, but it only paying out for so much. Josh Jacobs still doing the thing where he's the best running back. I'm sorry. He's like the fifth best running back in the NFL or whatever, and should have gotten paid a lot more money, but didn't because people have been telling this lie about how running doesn't matter, despite all the evidence we saw in week one where teams were solely dependent upon their run game to be successful. This was one of those games. What do you know? But yeah, the Raiders get a huge win over the Broncos, who have been on this massive slide within their own divisional matchups. I'm going to be honest with you, like, I watch football. I watch the replay of every single game. I know some strategy of football when it comes down to it. I don't get what the Broncos are trying to do. I don't understand what they're trying to do. If you do, please let me know. You might be the first and only person. So, but yeah, no, heartbreaking loss. Raiders beat the Broncos. Sean Payton gets the L in his return to head coaching. I will say, it's either out of understanding of job security or literally not caring if you get fired or not. Opening kick, an onside kick, that's how you keep them awake. You gotta make sure they're frosty, right? Got to make sure they woke up and almost recovered it too. If it wasn't for it was one of those moments where this is a bang bang play in the sense that this was a quarter of an inch from being a legal recovery, and it just didn't happen. So yeah. Moving on to the next category, the oh my set of games in terms of football. The San Francisco 49ers played football, and the Steelers were there. Final score was 30-7, and the Niners did the thing where they utilized every single player on their team that plays one position but also can play another one, like how George Kittle is a tight end but it's also basically a wide receiver, and how Debo is a wide receiver but also like kind of a running back. And then Brandon Ayuk just did the thing where he's like, I am actually a number one wide receiver, and you think Debo Samuels is a number one wide receiver. Also, Christian McCaffrey doing the thing where he's a running back on paper, but like in his heart and like literally everything else shows that he's a wide receiver. Anyway, Brock Purdy went out there, started slinging that thing. Bad things happens to the Steelers. This was not the exciting game that I said it would be last Tuesday, but it did have the result that I said it would. The 49ers going out there doing the thing. TJ Watt had 3 sacks in this game, and it did not matter. Yep, that was pretty bad. Turns out all that talent kind of useless if the guy who's in charge of distributing the ball cannot distribute the ball. The Steelers find themselves yet again, for what seems like the 15th consecutive year, complaining about how poor their offensive line play is. So that's fun for everyone. There's a lot of smart people who work for the Steelers, and we are literally all of Ben Roethlisberger's career and now all of Kenny Pickett's career so far still complaining about the offensive line not being up to snuff. Fantastic. But yeah, no, it's a bad L. I'm sure Mike Tomlin has figured out a way to completely. Oh, by the way, did I mention they lost Cam Hayward? Yeah, Cam Hayward got hurt in this one. So it could get worse, and it did. Patrick Peterson being at the number one cornerback position is going to be interesting, because I listened to the Pivot podcast. There we go. And he said Mike T is supposed to be moving him around to multiple spots on the field and seeing how that works out. And one time Patrick Peterson got cooked pretty nasty. The other time, Brandon Ayuk just made an absolutely amazing catch while Patrick Peterson was directly next to him trying to fight for the ball. That happens as well. People will try and pretend that is the same as getting like 10 yards of separation, and it is not. Sometimes people just make better plays. Patrick Peterson, I'm sure, will bounce back from this one, because he always does. That's how he stayed in the league for this long. So, yeah, pass rush was there for the Steelers. Pass coverage, not so much. A little tough. It is tough to kind of keep up with Kyle Shanahan's evil genius brain, because unlike every other coach in the NFL, he understands the importance of the run game and how to run it. By the way, new shiny toy that every coach now currently has, and I think it's the dawning of a new generation, right? Orbit motion, which if you're not familiar with, it's the type of motion where a wide receiver typically comes from like the weak side, runs behind the running back, and it's like it's got some like half orbit or reverse orbit is one of the names to it, but it's basically like you run around the back of the running back and you either line up on the opposite side of the formation, which rarely does happen because they're basically using the orbit motion to trigger either the passing of a offensive player between the gaps in the zone, or to see if a defensive back is going to follow the wide receiver that's sent, right? Like that's the basic way to check between man and zone. And then they use the reverse orbit. So you get to the hat, you get right behind the running back, and you start running back where you originally were. And while you're running parallel to the line of scrimmage, they snap the ball, and you can get off the line of scrimmage uncontested. And that works really well for these small, fast wide receivers, which are becoming the thing, right? Like they are the thing for everything that's going on in the NFL right now. Like Tank Dell is the most recent addition to it, but you look at like one of the most dominant receivers in the game, and Tyreek Hill, he is not small, because one thing about Tyreek is that his speed comes from the fact that he got muscle in places that most people don't, right? And it helps him be able to run very, very fast. I don't know if you guys seen him run or not. He's pretty quick. But yeah, a lot of that was going on throughout the course of it was some stuff that only certain coaches use, but pretty much every single team used it this past weekend. And for some teams it worked. For a lot of teams, it got their little fast wide receivers open, which kind of sucks because it is yet another thing that defensive teams are going to have to figure out how to counter, which probably will only take like 1 or 2 years or something like that. It is also the motion that was used in the Super Bowl to get those 2 touchdowns. One coming from pass interference, and one of those was like a whip route to Sky Moore, and another one was a whip route to Kadarius Toney, right? On the naked side, on the open outside portion of the play. That same motion was used to get those guys open. So it's not a surprise that people have copied it and put it into their playbook. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, the 49ers played the Steelers. I'm moving on with my life, and so should you. The 49ers look like the Super Bowl contender we thought they were. The Steelers do not look like the division contender that a lot of people thought they were, but it's only week 1. So maybe Kenny Pickett will get better at playing football, because he finished the season like relatively decently, and he also went up against a 49ers defense that's probably going to be in contention for number 1 in the NFL. So if there's ever a defense to get embarrassed by, it is the number 1 defense in the NFL. And move on with your life. Thursday Night Football, this is the oh my category. The Detroit Lions 21, the Kansas City Chiefs 20. So we pretty much, when I say we, I mean me. You were here. You were there for it. But last Tuesday, I verbatim kind of told you what needed to happen from the Detroit Lions, and then they did it. I told you that they needed the secondary to go out there and make plays, because I felt like the pass rush was going to be there for them. Aiden Hutchinson was in Jawan Taylor's ass all night, and I don't mean in the comfortable way. He was on him like white on rice, and I don't say that because he's white. But Brian Branch is a rookie corner from Alabama. Tell me if you've heard this one before. He's very good at football. He gets a pick 6. Although he does not finish the game, he got hurt at some point and had to go out. The biggest disappointment for the Lions, obviously people want to see more Jahmyr Gibbs. He got a couple of carries. One of them was for like 25 yards, and people want to see more of that. Right? Logically, they want to see more of that. They don't want to see David Montgomery, even though David Montgomery did run the ball very, very well. Amon-Ra St. Brown, looking really good. Jameson Williams, non-existent in this game. But that plus, my favorite thing about this game was when you have a ex-NFL tight end and Dan Campbell as a head coach, they put tight ends in weird spots, or like request that tight ends get put in weird spots. And so they went and got Sam Laporta, and they were like, what if we put that big motherfucker out there where those small people at? And then he cooked every single one of those small people. Sam Laporta might be the new slant boy. You know what I mean? He might be taking Michael Thomas's old title of Slant Boy. He might be Slant Boy Jr. because Michael Thomas actually looked pretty good last Sunday. Slant Boy Jr. is what they were trying to call Chris Olave, and then they saw him run like a post route, and then people stopped saying it. But yeah, Sam Laporta ran like 3 slants for like 15 yards in this game. Very impressive. One, that the team felt comfortable enough to put him in those positions to be able to go out there and make those plays. But then 2, that he did it against like corners that won the Super Bowl like a couple months ago. So yeah, that's good. I like that. The Detroit Lions getting weird and it paying off. We all love it. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, we all know one thing is true. One of the 2 teams that went to the Super Bowl is supposed to suck this year. Keep that in mind. That's how the math works usually. If you go to the Super Bowl one of the two teams is supposed to fall off a goddamn cliff the following year. So when the Rams won it, it was them. They went 5-12. Remember that? Anyway, the Washington Commanders played the Arizona Cardinals, and as a matter of fact, the Arizona Cardinals almost played them, and they almost fucked around and won this game. There was a defensive touchdown involved. Josh Dobbs is the starting quarterback, in case a lot of you guys are wondering out there. But for the most part, the Cardinals were the absolute peak definition of scrappy. They are now walking the path that so many teams before them have walked of they are going to bust their ass every single play, every single game, until there are so many injuries that the talent level is bereft on the Cardinals, and then they won't be able to compete anymore. The Commanders, great pass rush performance throughout the course of this game, and it paid off for them big time while they, say it with me folks, waited for the offense to get in rhythm. Anyway, they kind of pieced it together towards the end. The Commanders did not come out and look like the explosive offense that so many people claim that they were going to be, but it is only week one. Sam Howell is a young quarterback, but to sit there and say that he don't have the guys to throw to, that's really nice to confirm that we know that that's not the case, right? We know Diami Brown's out there. We know that he's got Scary Terry, and that's a lot more than a lot of other people can say in the NFL. So, by the way, moving on to the next oh my game out here. The Jacksonville Jaguars played the Indianapolis Colts in probably one of the strangest back and forth affairs and third most deceptive score, because the like I said before, when the Browns played the Bengals, it was 13-3 to start the fourth quarter, and the final score was like 24-6 or something, or 24-3, my bad, and it looks way worse than it actually was. But the Jacksonville Jaguars 31, the Indianapolis Colts 21. Remember, coming into this game, the Jaguars were the AFC South preeminent champion. Like, they already crowned them. They already crowned their ass, in the immortal words of, is it Daniel Green, I think? Anyway, 31-21 in this one. The Jaguars look like a truly complete team on offense. They were able to run the ball relatively successful with a combination of Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. Who would have thought? Pretty good running back out of Auburn, and he had a weird situation where he gave up a touchdown to DeForest Buckner off of what looked to be a forward pass, but it was that weird moment where he got hit as he was throwing the ball forward, but his arm wasn't moving forward. The ball was loose, and his hand hit the ball forward, if that makes sense, which is the empty hand rule in the NFL. And it results in a fumble picked up by Tank. Tank Bigsby picks it up and then gets the ball poked out from behind. A lot of people, and those people being myself, is you see a player pick up the ball and they stand completely still. Most of the time in the NFL, they call that a player giving themselves up. So, but maybe it was such a bang play in the view of the referees, they let it fly, and it turns into DeForest Buckner's big ass running into the end zone, getting the Jaguars one of their 3 touchdowns, which would have been 4 touchdowns. The Anthony Richardson's final drive actually got them down to like the 3rd-yard line. They put in Gardner Minshew, who a lot of people seem to be really excited about. There's a guy in my fantasy league who's a Jaguars fan, and he loves Gardner Minshew, and he's secretly hoping that Anthony Richardson gets pulled and Gardner Minshew gets put in. Anyway, I don't know why you wish that upon anybody. Anthony Richardson gets them basically down to like the 5-yard line. He takes off and runs, gets to the 3-yard line, but in the process gets hit by 3 Jaguars players at the same time. Takes him a little while to get up. They decide, hey man, it's the first game in the history of like our young quarterback's life. As a matter of fact, he's the youngest Colt ever to start a football game ever. Maybe, just maybe, we don't literally run him into the ground. This one touchdown when we're down by 2, touchdowns. I'm sorry, down by 3 possessions, because it was 2 touchdowns and a field goal, I believe it was. And maybe we don't need that. So they go out there. Gardner Minshew can't get the ball in on the final drive of the game, and the Jaguars walk off with the victory. Josh Allen, the other one. Josh Allen, there's only one Josh Allen that had a good week this week. It was the Josh Allen that got 3 of the Jaguars' 4 sacks on Anthony Richardson. One thing I will say about this first and second half in this game was night and day. Anthony spent a lot of time looking like them quarterbacks that racists talk about, where he's a run-first, dual-threat quarterback, but he showed the dual part in the second half. First, he showed the first threat, the legs, in the first half, and in the second half, he started kind of distributing the ball a little bit. But it's my biggest concern is that he starts locking in on Michael Pittman Jr. a little bit too much, because Michael Pittman Jr. gets the most separation and has the most reliable hands on the team. And woo boy, you watch some of those highlights. I watched the game. I watched this one twice. He was slanging. I mean, like boo boo, pew pew, right into the gap a couple of times in the second half of this game, in particular in the third quarter, to Michael Pittman Jr. And one of the best drives that they had all game was a beautiful combination of Anthony Richardson being able to get outside the pocket, because guess what? His offensive line, like they were last year, was getting destroyed by how good these Jaguars were up front. And Anthony Richardson against an inferior linebacker other than Oluokun, probably would have got away with a lot more, to be honest with you, but he didn't. Oluokun I think he got like multiple tackles on Anthony Richardson in the open field, and he deflected what would have been that 4th touchdown for the Colts. He deflected that out of bounds, defending a wide receiver, by the way. He was defending Michael Pittman Jr. and deflected the ball out of bounds, because Oluokun is insane as a linebacker. I don't understand how he's that good and nobody talks about him. Anyway, Anthony Richardson showed massive amounts of promise in this one. The Jaguars had me worried. I'm not gonna lie. They started off hot, but what really chipped away is the fact that the Colts turned the ball over a bunch throughout the course of this game. I want to say they had 3 turnovers in total, but the Jaguars had 2 turnovers to go along with it themselves. One of them was like a freak interception, and the other one was like a weird, like a running back had the ball popped out as they were going down to the ground. But for the most part, man, the Jaguars didn't look great until the end of this game, and I think that was more on the fact that the Colts kind of stopped responding as an offense towards the midpoint of the third quarter, and the Jaguars kept kind of getting yards, and they were able to chip away. The Colts defense was flying everywhere. It's one thing when you see a run play and there's a linebacker there or 2 linebackers and a defensive end. It's another thing where literally as soon as the initial tackler makes contact with the ball carrier, and then 5 other dudes literally fly into the frame to jump on top of the running back. And that happened multiple times throughout the course of this game. I love the way the Colts may be an AFC South team. They have a top 5 defense in the NFL, and I love the way they play defense, man. They everywhere. It would be nice to be DeForest Buckner, be 6'7", play defensive end, but maybe next lifetime. Who knows? But yeah, you could almost see the Colts defense play better after they realized that Anthony Richardson kind of had some juice in terms of being able to get the ball moved around and get further down the field and all this kind of stuff like that, which is really cool to see. But yeah, the basically the end of this game was around the 5-minute mark. Tyson Campbell caught an interception versus Anthony Richardson. He just didn't see him. I think he was dropped down as he was a robber in cover 3. Don't quote me on that. I think it was cover 3. He was a robber, and he just sat down in the zone. And when Michael Pittman Jr. ran a comeback, he just popped up like a jack in the box. They showed the angle from over Anthony Richardson's like right shoulder as he was releasing, and it literally looks like he popped up out of the ground. So shout out to Tyson Campbell, got another interception, and also big rushing touchdown from Travis Etienne. Good to see him still doing his thing, man. Good to see him back here doing his thing, and he's healthy. His brother plays for Florida, so if that matters to you, I just know that because I follow the Jaguars.com beat reporter. Oh no, it's Holly Rowe. Holly Rowe from ESPN interviewed Travis's brother, and she talked about how like she was just like, Travis has told me a lot about you over the past couple years, and it's nice to finally meet you. I remember that on Instagram. I don't know why I thought it was the Jaguars beat reporter. Anyway, final category of the night. This is what we're here for. These are the games that make fans and are absolutely amazing. Like I said before, we're gonna start at the top. We're gonna start with the primo stuff. Reach to the top shelf right here. Bring it down. It is this is Miami Dolphins versus the LA Chargers. Absolute prime beef. Immaculate game. 36-34 was the final score in this one. 70 points between the two teams. The Chargers remembered to run the football and it worked. The Dolphins had Tua throwing and completing out routes. Tua looked like he was not concerned at all for the sanctity and safety of his brain, while also going out there and making plays, ladies and gentlemen. It was immaculate to see from beginning to end. Easily the best game of the entire weekend, and it came down to the wire as well. It was another game-winning drive, and this is very similar to how the Miami Dolphins started last season. There's a reason that I picked these guys, that I think they can go out here and they can do the damn thing. This is why these moments right here, they stood up to the challenge that was the Chargers. And although their defense may have struggled to live up to the hype that I personally believe in, and I'm sure a bunch of their fans do as well, they still went out there and made it happen, man. Tua looked like the guy that y'all told me he wasn't, but I've been saying that he is for 3 years. When he had that trash offensive line 3 years ago, where they gave up the second most sacks ever. Of course, first being the Houston Texans with David Carr. Sorry, David. If you're out there watching this, I'm sorry. They did you dirty, man. Let's be real. Nobody's ever going to break the record. I think it was like 78 sacks in a single season. Absolutely insane. I'm glad you got paid, though, bro. I'm glad you got paid. The Falcons took on the Carolina Panthers. This one was intriguing. So it came off, and tell me if I'm wrong if you're a person who watched it, this came off like it was a big brain battle. This was a big brain game for people, and ironically enough, big brain for people who run the ball. Arthur Smith, obviously, like we said before, Mina Kimes has said it, a lot of other people have said it. A lot of people leaning into the hipsterness of the Atlanta Falcons in terms of like how they run their offense, what they do in the pass game, what they do in the rush game in particular, all the different formations, which, by the way, was like one of the best parts of this entire season. Everybody lined up in a multitude of formations. We saw a lot of double tight end. We saw a lot of four evens across. We saw a lot of uneven trips on left and trips on right, trips on the field side and trips on the closed side. Saw some wing T. I'm dead serious. We saw a full house formation a couple times, not just in this game. I'm talking about across the entire weekend. Absolutely. It's so fun when defenses get weird. I enjoyed it. We saw a bunch of wide nine for some defensive lines to go out there and make weird things happen. Remember that one time Andy Reid believed in the wide nine position for the defensive ends, and then, they fired him? Yeah. Anyway, that every time I hear the term wide nine, I always think of that year where like Andy Reid let this one guy be defensive coordinator, and he basically wide nine himself into unemployment. It was crazy. Anyway, the Falcons played the Panthers 24-10. So this, I thought it was a battle of the run masters. Ironically enough, this is one. If you're one of those people who doesn't think that Saquon Barkley deserves at least $16 million a year, if you're one of those people who prescribes to and thinks that PFF is Jesus, by the way, shout out to Sam Monson and those guys out there. I really enjoy listening to your podcast, but I disagree on your perspective about the run game. If you're one of those people who doesn't believe that you should run the damn ball, this game is not for you. This game is not for trash people like you. The Falcons took on the Panthers. Going to say that for the third time. The Falcons had Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson. Both combined together look like two number one running backs. And it's not often you got that. It's not often you got that, and it's a good thing they do because that boy Desmond Ridder was really struggling out there. Most of the time they ran. I will say this: there was some evidence that play action is ineffective against certain defenses because at the end of the day, the best way to generate pressure is to run at the ball, and the only way to run at the ball is to get beyond the line of scrimmage, and whatever happens on that side happens on that side, right? You figure it out as you go for the most part. So. This, like I said before, it felt like people were trying to flex how creative they can get in the run game, and I thought that was kind of cool. By the way, Chuba Hubbard looking fire. Miles Sanders, a lot of people say Miles Sanders is a mid running back. I obviously hate that people say that about Miles Sanders. I think he's a really good football player, but he came out there. He did a pretty good job. Overall, the Panthers really struggled in terms of moving the ball down the field, right? They didn't have any big explosive plays. They had some mid-range plays that panned out pretty well. One thing I will say, for a short guy, Bryce Young, not afraid to throw it over the middle. He was also pretty good at knowing where to dump the ball off when he got flushed out of the pocket, and also did a really good job of making sure he kept looking downfield to see if there was any openings. Unlucky for him, Jesse Bates is that dude still, bro. Jesse Bates is still that guy. He had 2 interceptions in this game. One was bait. One, he tricked our precious young Bryce Young into throwing it directly at him by not falling for his eye fake. And then there was another one where Jesse Bates just knew what the play was. Like, it was very clear he knew what route was about to be run directly in front of him, and he ran and he beat the wide receiver to the spot where the ball was being thrown. So, yeah, Jesse Bates, still that guy, which means that there was a lid on the defense the entire game because Jesse Bates is still that guy. Bijan Robinson has maybe one of the best first touchdowns ever for any player in the history of the NFL, with a dead leg so nasty that he sent my guy Frankie, shout out Frankie Louvu, underrated hipster level top tier linebacker in the NFL. He sent him off frame. And then right after that immediately broke 2 tackles to get a touchdown. Because that guy is not normal. He's not human. Bijan Robinson is really cool to watch him run. There's this guy on TikTok who makes like miniature highlight films where he does exaggerated reactions, and it's called a multitude of things, but he has one for running backs. He's like, man, I love the way that guy toasts the rock. And if you know on TikTok, you know exactly what I'm talking about. 5 years from now, he's going to be doing that for Bijan Robinson. Hopefully he's still around, still doing it. Hopefully TikTok's still around, still doing it. Anyway, outside of that freakish play from Bijan Robinson and a couple other ones that happened in the second half of this game, it really felt like the Panthers defense put the clamps on the Falcons. There was one play, they snapped the ball. It was an option read, and Desmond Ridder got so shook by how fast the D-line from the Panthers got on top of him that he didn't even do the read part. It just became throw the ball to Bijan, and unlucky for Bijan Robinson, Brian Burns was already 2 feet away from him as soon as he got the ball, and he just plowed him into the ground. Brian Burns dominated this game. Derrick Brown was on fire. Shout out to the big dog up front. Derrick Brown cooked in this game. Multiple tackles for loss, dominated the line of scrimmage, really affected the run game overall, and I say that as a guy who also watched the Panthers defense get tired in the fourth quarter, because this game was 10-10 to start the fourth quarter, and it finished 24-10. So, yeah, I will also point out the Panthers had 7 possessions in the second half of this game, and 3 of them ended up in turnovers. One was an interception, another one was a fumble, and the other one was turnover on downs on the final possession. Not a great way to be successful in the long run, right? Oh, super sad stat that almost made streaks, peaks, and ditches on this one. The Falcons are, for the first time in 7 years, above 500. Moving on, Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing the Minnesota Vikings. Today marks the 25th career, Sunday was the 25th career game for Justin Jefferson with 100-plus receiving yards. And they have to do this for the NFL all the time. It's super weird that they have it down to the day, but I guess it's the way to define the record. Justin Jefferson is 24 years old. On Sunday, he was 24 years old in 86 days. He is because of that 100-yard game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he became the youngest wide receiver to reach 25 career 100-yard receiving games. The guy he beat out was Randy Moss. For all those old people on the internet that keep trying to tell us that Justin Jefferson is not Randy Moss, you're right, he's not Randy Moss. He might be better. There, I said it. Moving on. This game was a big takeaway from this game. Baker Mayfield, semi-stiff-armed a defensive back into the ground as he was moving forward for a couple yards, and then got up in that guy's face while he was mic'd up and said, "Get your weight up, boy." And the way he said it, one, was very clear that he had said it before. Two, I'm a little surprised he didn't put a nigga on the end of it. And I don't mean in a racist way. I mean in the way that, get your weight up, nigga. Little nigga. Like normal people do. Anyway, am I about to get demonetized on YouTube for saying that, even though I'm black? Who knows? I don't care. I'm not monetizing anything on here. But yeah, no, I thought it was funny. I thought it was pretty funny. I saw that clip and I was like, there's no way. There's not a chance in hell that this actually happened. Because you can't see his mouth saying it. You can see him hop up, get in the DB's face, and then run away. And I'm like, bro, you still got tackled out of bounds. You can't say, "Get your weight up, boy," and then after you get up off the ground. You know what I mean? So that's what he did. But yeah, this game was interesting because it was yet another one-possession game. Tell me if you've heard this one before. Except, plot twist, the Vikings lose this one. The turnovers killed them in this one, bro. The turnovers were brutal for the Vikings overall throughout the course of this game. Baker Mayfield kind of cooked a little bit. Threw it down to Mike Evans here and there. You know what I mean? Sprinkle it around, shared a little bit. But the defense carried hard in this one. I see why Devin White demanded a trade to try and negotiate into more money. Because if this is an indicator of things to come, better get your money now before they start blaming you in case things go south. Still not very sure whether the Minnesota Vikings suck or are good, which guess what? Welcome to the Minnesota Vikings for the last, 4 years? Anyway, don't have any funny stories from that one. The Eagles played the Patriots. Mostly became, I want to say, every Patriots fan's wet dream. Because Tom Brady was there. He was wearing the Tom Brady jersey. And they all just remember the good times. Because they were having a bad time while this game was going on. Eagles defense hold the Patriots to 20 points. Don't know if that's a good or a bad thing yet until we see how the Patriots do in a couple other games. Because their offense didn't look spectacular. By the way, Ramondre Stevenson. Look, man, you need to get your paper now before, because it looks like you're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting this season. A lot of heavy lifting, my guy. But yeah, Kayshon Boutte makes his first appearance on the mainstream by having what would have been an absolutely ridiculous catch if you gotten one more foot down. Kayshon Boutte, if you don't remember, LSU wide receiver who left early after a sex party scandal. Look it up. At LSU. Not surprising at all. Philadelphia Eagles, 25. New England Patriots, 20. The Eagles don't look great on offense, but still pull out the dub. The defense holds up their end of the bargain. Still waiting on that elite level pass rush to make its appearance. You know what I mean? We're all still waiting to see Jalen Carter, the most athletic athlete to ever go to the combine, look like that guy. Maybe athleticism isn't just all a bunch of data points put into one formula to calculate if you're good at stuff. Nah, he's probably just... No, it can't be that. The Rams, 30-13. This game, most deceptive score of the entire weekend. At 11-16 in the fourth quarter, this game was 17-13. This game was a ton of fun to watch. Van Jefferson Jr. is back. In case anybody was wondering, Van Jefferson Jr. is back. We all love it. Sean McVay is back to being weird with the offense. So this was a simple solution to a simple problem. Last year, the Rams really sucked at when they snapped the ball and it was a pass play, protecting the quarterback longer than 2 seconds. So, Sean McVay's solution is, what if we put more people out there to help with the blocking? But those 2 people we put out there also can run routes. Yeah, 12 personnel is back. I hope Sean McVay's most devious plan of all is to bring back double tight end. Because it really felt when Aaron Hernandez and Gronkowski were on the field at the same. Not to say that Higbee and I knew I was gonna forget his name as soon as I said it out loud. Anyway, it felt like all those years ago when he had Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, probably the greatest double tight end set ever in terms of formation and skill wise. It felt like we never really got to see it come to full fruition, and maybe Sean McVay is the man to solve that puzzle, to crack that enigma, if you will. And this game was a ton of fun for me to watch personally. It was a Seattle Seahawks season opener. The defense looks spectacular. Jordan Brooks coming back from an ACL tear in less than 7 months and still flying around like nothing happened. Going back to what Sean McVay did, he used double tight end formation so that when defensive ends rushed from the outside positions, either it forced them to be chipped on their way towards the quarterback, or it forced them into the wide 9 position where they had to line up to the outside of the tight end, which, if the tight ends were running flat routes, would give them the ability to run and impede the path of the defensive linemen as they were closing in towards the quarterback, and give the tackles time to get into their kick step to set deep enough to prevent Matthew Stafford from getting sacked. Now, Matthew Stafford had a lot of time in this game, and that's what killed the Seahawks. He had a lot of time. I think they got him maybe one time, and I think it was off of a rushing play. I don't think they got any sacks in this one. They got a little bit of pressure, but the time that Matthew Stafford had in the pocket, from my eyes, looked like it was the most that any quarterback had this entire weekend, which is not a surprise because the strategy worked, man. Puka Nacua got open. Van Jefferson Jr. got open deep down the field. And then, like we mentioned before about that orbit motion where you run like half the perimeter or like half the formation and go back to where you were before. Well, they were moving Tutu Atwell with a bunch of different types of motion to get him off the line untouched by defensive backs. And they were pushing the defensive backs to the limit. Now, Geno Smith did not look great in this one. Most people don't look great when they lose their number 1 wide receiver in Tyler Lockett and then both of their starting left and right tackles throughout the course of the game. Most people tend to struggle. Geno Smith, human being. Who would have thought? But yeah, that's literally what happened in the second half of the game. The first half, it was a back and forth kind of affair. The Seahawks were meeting them stride for stride. They were doing a great job defending up front with the run, which is really cool to see because Al Woods isn't there, and Al Woods is one of those human beings that just doesn't move when you hit him. But yeah, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks doing a good job of defending the run. Some of the safety stuff was looking like they were maybe 1 or 2 steps away from being able to pull off some turnovers. And overall, what really did them in is not being able to get off the field. The Rams had multiple 10-plus play drives throughout the course of this game. And a lot of the stuff in the second half was Kyren Williams, who, by the way, thanks for showing up, Cam Akers. You probably lost your job to a rookie. Kyren Williams had 2 touchdowns in the course of this game and a bunch of big runs up the middle, which is huge for the Rams because it gives them that versatility, and it means that he's been successful with what the offensive line is being able to give him. Because that was like one of the biggest problems. Like the Rams offensive line really struggled with blocking in general. And they went out there and they actually had a really good rushing day up front, which is huge. especially later on, because it takes some of the heat off Matthew Stafford. So that's pretty much it. The Seahawks offense struggled in the red zone for the most part. There was that one cool play, DK Metcalf with the jab step to the inside, gets a defensive back to jump 5 yards as if he's going to run and hop the route, and then DK just runs to the back left corner of the end zone for a wide open and very easy catch on the part of Geno Smith. When they're open, he can hit them. That was the biggest problem. They did a good job of getting the mix in for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'm assuming they're going to do some more of that throughout the course of the season because he's an Ohio State wide receiver, so he's got some moves they can put on some people. Especially with Tyler Lockett going down, you have to imagine that Jackson's role is going to up a little bit. Tyler went out with a concussion, so I think by definition, the earliest he can come back is like Wednesday. Which would be later today. So yeah, the Rams offense wore down the Seahawks defense up front, and their run game really kicked it up a notch. But Puka Nacua was killing them. He was catching within really tight windows, and honestly, looked like he is a legit contender to be the top 3 in terms of the wide receivers. So Tutu Atwell may be taking a seat. Or they're running 4 wide. Also, Julian Love was killing it at the safety spot for the Seahawks throughout the course of this game. Jamal Adams came back to practice for the Seahawks yesterday on Tuesday, and I'm kind of wondering, what's gonna? Is Quandre Diggs gonna have to take a seat, or what? I'm still trying to figure it out. Based off what happened on Sunday, it's got to be pretty hard to make an argument to take out Julian Love. He looked really good on the defensive side of the ball, but that's just me. What do I know? I'm just a guy who watches football on Sundays and Monday and Thursday. I don't watch it on Tuesdays anymore. That was 2020. Anyway, on that note, I'm out. Thanks for showing up. Really appreciate it. To everybody who watched all the way to the end, make sure you tip your waiter. Don't know why I said that. Make sure you wash your hands, drink your water, and go home, Roger. I'm going to go to sleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I need that. I have to go to work tomorrow. Later.